all facing in this industry a challenge of how do we upgrade, how do we innovate, how do we bring technology to scale. It's a race to the future. And right now, I think from a technology standpoint, the edge you got to say, at least in China, is to the local brands.
Give us a quick update as to where things have what has happened in the last, say, 6 months with respect to the EV and mobility sector.
Well, 6 months is a snapshot in time, but a lot has changed so far this year. 64% of passenger vehicles sold in China are locally branded. In 2020, to give it easy to remember, the same number, 64%, was held by foreign brands, and that's largely because of electrification. The Chinese companies went faster than the multinationals to the EV future. BYD surpassed within the last 6 months, actually 3 months ago. Volkswagen is the top selling brand in China. It is the number one company with 34%, 35% actually of the market for this year.
And also, my perception, Bill, is that there's been an acceleration of the globalization of Chinese companies. Chinese have been going global, outbound.
In 2023, China made 32% of all the vehicles made in the world. 29% of those vehicles sold in the world were sold in China. So it is by far the most dominant. The number two country in terms of automotive production is the United States with 11%. So China is about a market for production that is 3 times larger than the US. And if you're talking about electric vehicles, they actually make 64% of the world's electric vehicles. So 2 out of every 3 EVs made in the world are made in China. So in 2023, China sold more vehicles, exported made in China vehicles outside of to the rest of the world than any other nation. It surpassed Japan with 4.9 million vehicles exported. That continues into this year. Exports from China will be somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 6.5 million units this year. So it's not a lead that they just got and will hold on to for a short period of time. It's a widening lead. Now, here's the thing that I think most people would find fascinating is 78% of the cars made in China this year that were exported powered by an internal combustion engine. So if we kind of think of the story of China's rise as an automotive powerhouse of global relevancy, we tend to think of it only based on its challenge in the next generation of automotive technology, mainly electric vehicles. But the reality is China's going global with a whole lot of gasoline-powered vehicles in the export mix. And the reason for that is China as a country isn't buying the combustion engine configurations as much as they had in the past.
It's been reported in the press that there's been a slowdown in investment in EV production by some of the major OEMs across the world, as well as perhaps a slowing of adoption and purchasing by the consumer. What actually is happening in the marketplace?
The fact is, the EV market has continued to rise. In China, it continues to rise exponentially. The lack of retail acceptance has been largely because of affordability, I believe. Something that China has cracked, right? The ability to scale and make EVs affordable. Something the rest of the world has not, for reasons that I think are a bit of a mix between not having the capability, the supply chain in particular capability, and really not having the infrastructure that I've seen installed here over the last decade for making EVs more convenient to use. So the facts are, I think the market acceptance would be much higher globally if we had globally scaled supply chains for these types of products.
Right.
But that's, I think, the function of the geopolitical environment that we're in.
The U.S. has already imposed tariffs, and then there's more tariffs, especially if Donald Trump is elected. Europe is in the middle of in the process of imposing new tariffs potentially, or at least negotiating the terms of those new tariffs. Yeah.
Just look at what Jim Farley has said about his experience of coming to China and realizing that they're ahead of us now. And that was a quote that he made after experiencing the Chinese products. He's told his team he took a Xiaomi SU7 product and he doesn't want to give it back because he's enjoying it so much. Now he's obviously signaling to his people we better be able to compete with with China. And I think that's what we all ought to be motivated to do. But tariffs are designed to prevent that competition, or at least slow it down significantly. If you've been beaten, or if you're dealing with somebody with superior technology or competitiveness, then you're going to resort to tariffs as a way of leveling the playing field, which I think is what both Europe and the US is trying to do. But there's a vast difference between what the US did, which was basically put up a stop sign and say, no, China, we're going to do 100% tariffs and we're not even going to talk about it, versus what the EU did, which says we're going to create a graded system. So you're all going to get different grades depending on a certain set of factors. They said the factors were based on how much they complied with the EU anti-subsidy investigation. It's a recognition that I think pragmatically the competitiveness of the European automotive companies in large part depend on their ability to access China and access the Chinese supply chain. And I think that's probably a more pragmatic way to deal with the geopolitical issue, and frankly, the competitive challenge that China represents to the automotive industry.